but the fact that as a nation we undertook this enterprise. What's our legacy beyond the actual engineering field?
The irony in this celebrating this summer is we're not much different than we were when we went to the moon. For those of you who are worried about today, don't worry about today. We're nowhere close to how bad we were as a nation. When I was between 1950 something and 68 when I graduated from the Naval Academy, that was really bad because we were killing each other in the streets. We were doing all other kinds of stuff. And contrary to popular belief, while NASA got an incredible budget for the Apollo program, it was not something that had this massive support from the public. Most people were worried about Vietnam, civil rights, other kinds of things, and yet we put a human being on the moon. And so if we did it then, I'm encouraged that we can do it now. So that's the legacy is we can do things when we set our hearts to it.
And that brings me seamlessly to my next question. When we were backstage earlier, I was mentioning that I was speaking to a project manager at NASA a few days ago, and I said, we launched 4 missions in 1969, 1 into Earth orbit, 3 to the moon. Now the best NASA is talking about is maybe being able to get 1 lunar mission off a year. And he said to me, well, because it has to be a priority for people again. When we made Apollo happen, we crossed 4 presidencies, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 6 Congresses, and yet the goal remained, America remained monomaniacally focused on getting to the moon. Are we capable of that now?
Yeah, I think we are. The big difference between then and now is then we were driven by a geopolitical imperative. We could not let the Soviets beat us to the moon. That no question. That was it. That was the reason. And so we would have spent $100 million or billion or whatever it is. Today, we are driven as humanity to find a way to help us live on this planet and to survive on the planet. And you're going to have an opportunity to talk with some folk right after us about what's going on the International Space Station today. And I think we have an equal geopolitical imperative, and that's that we figure out how to save the planet. And the work that's going on the International Space Station today gives us an opportunity to do that. Extending humanity to the moon, back to the moon, and then on to Mars, we'll learn even more. So I think we have the drive if we can just inform people about why it's important. Everybody knew why it was important to beat the Soviets.
Right. So we don't need. People often talk about the fact that we don't need an enemy.
I am opposed to finding an enemy. If as the greatest nation in the world and as intelligent as we are, we can't be motivated to do what's right for the planet without an enemy, then we don't deserve to go back to the moon and all.
Right. We'd just be taking our bad habits there.
Yeah.
So, the shuttle program. Obviously, you were intimately involved in both participating in and overseeing the shuttle program. After the moon, the shuttle program, as gorgeous as this machine is, could not quite excite people in the same way because it was, we were in the sort of within the harbor of Earth's gravity. And yet it did remarkable work. It did extraordinary work, both in terms of exploration and engineering. In the long march of human exploration, what do you think shuttle's role in that will be?
I will take issue with one premise.
Okay.
That was that shuttle couldn't quite do what we did on Apollo. If you were at the Kennedy Space Center for Apollo 1, for a shuttle, for STS-1 through, say, STS-6 or 7 or 8, it was more than Apollo in terms of public response. I remember STS-1, the best thing that happened was we didn't launch the first day.
Right.
Because we were still trying to figure out how to get people on the Kennedy Space Center.
Really?
People had come from around the world. People were there. It was like people coming to see some rock group nowadays where they line up 4 or 5 days in advance to get a ticket.
Right.
People were all over the space coast of Florida for days prior to the launch to make sure they could they could get on, and so we didn't figure it out very well. I would have missed it. My family and I were trying to get there, and we were in the astronaut office. So we had the attention and the excitement that we had from Apollo, but in America, our attention span is very brief.
Right.
So I would caution people when we get ready to go back to the moon, whether it's 2024 or whenever, it's going to be like that at the Cape.
Right.
Again, and it'll be that way for a couple of flights.
Right.
And when we get ready to go to Mars, it'll be that way. But again, what we need is to understand why we're doing it,
right,
so that the interest will remain. We didn't explain why we were doing shuttle until it was almost too late.
Right.
And we're struggling now trying to explain what value does the International Space Station have to humanity when it has incredible value.
Is there a key message in that is not getting across? Because I think if you ask the average person, when is the last time a human being has not been in space, the answer you would get would not be 2000.
You could go where I just came from, down to Washington, D.C., and go to a place called the U.S. Capitol, and go in and sit with members of the House and the Senate,
right,
and ask them, how long have we been operating on the International Space Station? And some of them would say, are we still doing that?
right.
And I don't say that as a joke, and that's sad. Anybody who is associated with a person who is 18 years or younger, that person, that 18-year-old, has never taken a breath when human beings have not been living and working in space with an international crew. That's the other thing. We've gone down to 2 people, and it's always been at least a Russian and an American. We've got to be better storytellers. I've taken on the task of trying to become a better storyteller, to tell about all the great work that's being done on the International Space Station today for humanity.
Right.
That's the message. The message is we are trying every single day with every experiment that we do on the International Space Station to make life better for people here on Earth. Whether it's looking at things like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, or we were just talking about some of the experimentation that's going on today, to help us combat diseases that afflict people in this room or people that all of us know. And we've got to get that message out instead of just allowing people to sit back and wonder what's going on up there.
Yeah, I sometimes say that if you ever want to win the perfect bar bet, go into a bar and ask somebody you're drinking with how many times human beings landed on the moon. They will never say just once. They'll never say once, because they'll assume that you wouldn't be asking the question if it was once. So the answer you'll get is twice. Nobody says 6. People just don't realize.
Or how many countries put somebody on the moon.
Yeah.
I have yet to ask that in an audience where people get it right.
Interesting. So we are sitting here with this gorgeous machine, and how does that get here? How did this happen that Enterprise wound up here in New York Harbor?
A family by the name of Fisher, a young lady by the name of Susan Marinoff, and I won't even try to pronounce the last part of it, and a rabid, driven group of people here in New York who worked with us at NASA to convince us that New York was one of the 4 places that should get a space shuttle.
Right.
And there were the things we looked at were, are people from around the world going to visit it? Are we going to be able to educate kids with it and inspire them to want to fly something like this? Can they afford it, for another thing? Or are they trying to use it to make money?
Right.
Because if you're not already making money and you're not solvent, we don't want to give you one to go have it sit idly by. So they worked really hard, and it was a team of people here in New York that collaborated with NASA, helping us to be convinced that this was one of the places to be.
And one final question I'm going to ask you, and then I'm actually probably going to ask our other guests this as well. It seems to me that whenever an administrator or a deputy administrator appears before Congress and has to justify why we want another $20 billion this year, the answers they give are always about spin-offs and always about working in space to benefit Earth. But the answer that cannot really speak its name is that because that's what we do, because that's what we, as this strange idiosyncratic species, does. We go to the moon, we go to Mars for the same reason we write symphonies and stage ballets, because that may not do anything to keep us alive, but it's one of the reasons we want to be alive in the first place. Is there a way to sell that message?
You just did. No, seriously, and it's something that I spend a lot of, I've thought about it a lot, and the reason I started by saying if we need an enemy to motivate us to do those things, then we don't understand the human psyche.
Right.
We are innately curious people. God made us, unlike most other things that breathe and do stuff like that, we always want to know what's across the river, what's on the other side of the mountain. When we stop being curious, when we stop wanting to know what's over there, then, I think we've decided on our own that, okay, it's time for my lights to go out. I'm no longer curious. I don't have any growth left to do. So that is a very good reason for what we do.
Yeah.
We do want to know what's out there, what's over there.
Yeah.
Is there something like us out there? Is there life out there? That is the one burning question for everybody I've ever worked with in this business, because if there's life in any form out there, it's going to be really a great thing for humanity.
Sure. Do you want to answer that, yes or no?
Yes. I don't know that we're ever going to see anything that, I know we won't see anything that looks like us in my lifetime. I just want to see some bugs.
Yeah.
I want to see some single cell organisms. We call them microbes. And I think we will see them in a test tube or in a microscope before we get to Mars, because we've got things like OSIRIS-REx, Hayabusa 2. We've got a lot of missions right now that are out gathering up samples and then bringing them back to Earth. And I think we're going to see what I call signs of life, and it's going to be life itself, single cell organisms.
Right.
And that's going to ignite all kinds of curiosity, even in people who are cynical.
Right, yeah. That's what I tell my daughters when I talk about this. I said, don't expect to see anything with a face, as long as if it's a bug.
If it's a bug, we're good.
We're good. All right, I am going to bring out our next two guests, and forgive me if I'm looking down at this paper, but they are so accomplished that I can't keep all of their achievements straight. We are bringing out Dr. Serena Auñón-Chancellor and Dr. Randy Giles to join us. Dr. Auñón-Chancellor was selected in 2009 as one of 14 members of the 20th NASA astronaut class. She completed her first space flight just in December 2018, logging 197 days aboard the International Space Station, conducting experiments, hundreds of experiments in biology, biotech, physical science, and earth science. She now spends her time handling medical issues for the ISS Operations Branch and Crew Branch. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Auñón-Chancellor. Oh, and I think we were supposed to switch seats, but we'll just keep it.
I'll slide over.
It's easier. No, we're good. We're good. You're stuck here. And Dr. Giles is the chief scientist of the ISS National Laboratory, which is basically, or the ISS National Laboratory, which is another name for the space station, right? More or less, or the lab aboard the space station. All right, we'll get into
We'll
that.
continue.
Right. Yes. For the operations and commercial, I'm reading the wrong thing, responsible for science strategy of the ISS to ensure the highest impact of R&D programs focused on benefits on life for Earth. Prior to joining the ISS National Laboratory, he worked for Bell Laboratories on photonic technologies to enable ultra-broadband flexible optical networking. He's way smarter than I. He can do the work I can't even pronounce it. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Giles. And I'm so sorry for botching. Okay, so we talked a little bit backstage about what we wanted to discuss here. And I want to ask you something similar to what I asked Charlie about where these accomplishments are in the arc of history. is the long-term significance of our having gone to the moon half a century ago? Is that the doing? Is it the engineering? Is it the blueprints that are still there? Or was it the focused collaborative energy of 400,000 Americans plus the political infrastructure that made it happen that got us to do this one great thing in one great time? And I would love to have thoughts from both of you on this.
Sure, I'll start with it. I think people look at it so many different ways. I used to be a flight surgeon before I went into the astronaut corps, so I'm very focused on the medical aspect of things. And I even hearken back to Apollo 1 and what we learned from that tragedy, actually. What we learned was that operating with 100% oxygen in a pressurized environment was really dangerous. And the lesson I took from that when I first read about the disaster itself, the thing I first thought was, wow, if we didn't learn this during Apollo 1 and unfortunately sacrifice the lives of 3 great heroes, we would have learned it at some point down the line. But we learned it early, we applied those lessons, and saved lives all the way throughout Apollo. We learned about how hatches open, how the best way to open a hatch to make it easy for the crew to get out. And believe me, when you're the crew riding in these vehicles or riding in a space station where your life depends on many, many things, you think about all those lessons learned, those who sacrificed their lives ahead of time to make your ride and your stay in safer. So I really go back to Apollo 1, which we don't talk about too much. We bring it up as a tragedy. We learned so much from that, medically, physically. Those are the rules we learned from that we still apply on station today. So I think it's important to focus on that. But I look at it from a medical perspective, and then that's how I love to focus on those. But like I said, everybody looks at it from a different angle.
Right. And your thoughts?
Well, I was 13 years old, living in rural Canada, adjusting the rabbit ears on a black and white TV to try to see that first landing on the moon. And I was just awestruck. I mean, even today, I think of the same thing. And whether it be just humanity as an achievement, as human beings, as species, becoming interplanetary, or on the engineering of it, and as to what it just inspires our hope for the future. It inspired us 50 years ago, it inspires us today. I get goosebumps to think about it right now.
And it wasn't, of course, just Americans. There were 3, in the course of Apollo, I think there were 3 great global comings together. It was Apollo 8, the Christmas Eve broadcast, when we first saw our Earth suspended in space, beautiful, breakable, solitary. It was Apollo 11, of course, the moon landing, and it was Apollo 13, which in some ways I think spoke to the greatest aspects of human nature, because we were not any longer looking for evil. The objective was not to achieve a great thing. The objective was to save 3 of our own. And there were 3.5 billion people around the world who were rooting for 3 people none of them had ever met. What is it about space that can do that can bring people across ethnic, ideological, age, socioeconomic boundaries and say, these are our emissaries? How does that work?
Space and the universe transcends humanity. It brings it together at the same time. You've got people out there at great peril, representing something which we've never experienced before, of the potential perishing in the vacuum of space. All of us could think of that as dread, but could also think of that as the greatness to find a solution, to survive in the universe. I think it is an amazing achievement and representation of what we are as survivors.
Yeah, and I think the way also, certainly Apollo 8 with Frank Borman and the Christmas Eve broadcast, and when we finally did land on the moon, it wasn't about America. It wasn't about only our nation as a whole. It was about mankind. It was good night and Merry Christmas to the good Earth. And when we finally landed on the moon, it was for all mankind. So, and that is our job as a great nation as we are, to also portray that it is for all mankind. We could have taken a very different tone, but we chose not to, because we realize the importance of that. And I think people identified with that because they could identify with those words resonated with them. So it was easy for them to see our achievement as everyone's achievement.
And that, it takes a more sort of utilitarian approach, that collaborative idea, when it comes to the International Space Station. I sometimes think people forget the enormity of the infrastructure. It is, if you could bring the space station down and set it on the ground, it would be larger than a football field. And it is flying, and it is functioning, and it was built by 15 nations. Is that what it
Yeah,
is?
16.
16 nations. You have people who are building modules on opposite sides of the planet, and then they have to snap together within tolerances of fractions of a millimeter. So that all came together. The design of the machine itself was a technological masterstroke. Can you both tell me a little bit from your various, the work you do in your various aspects on the ISS, what we're accomplishing off the Earth for the Earth? What kind of dividends are we now seeing?
I'll start with that. I could talk for an hour, 2 hours about this, because I think, as Charlie mentioned, I think it's our job to do we need to do better with our marketing. We need to make what we do on the ISS very personal to everybody on this planet, because no one really cares unless it's personal to them. So I'll tell you why it should be personal to you. All of us know somebody with cancer. All of us probably know somebody with Alzheimer's. All of us know somebody with Parkinson's disease. All of us know somebody who is suffering from some sort of eye disorder or blindness, age-related macular degeneration. All of these diseases are being worked on board the ISS. And people say, so what? We're doing the same research down here, not like we can do up there. Up there, in the microgravity environment, cells grow differently. They like being up there. They think they're in the human body. And so what we're able to determine up there is that we can look at structures with higher resolution, better quality, to better teach us how to make a drug to fight Parkinson's, to better teach us how to make a chemotherapy agent to fight a tumor's vascular supply or blood supply. We cannot do that research down here. We can only do it up there. So scientists are very excited by this, and they continue to send up validation after validation. Because I really do believe in the next 3 to 5 years, some of the work we're doing up there will help improve someone's disease down here. I'm an internist. I still practice. I still have patients with Parkinson's, and I've had people come up to me and ask when the work we're doing up there is coming down, because they want it now. So I think we're getting better at it, but one of my personal, missions, since my mission has ended about 4 months ago, is to try and bring this out to you guys so you can also share that information with people that you know. That the science we do up there, the medical science, means something. We are bringing it back down. It's not simple science, it's very high caliber, and it will help folks down here.
So with my job as the chief scientist for the U.S. National Lab on the Space Station, I go around the country to talk to investigators, academia, and industry, in government as well, to see what are the challenges that they're facing, and together try to see if the special environment of the space station, as Serena just described, is suitable to accelerate their investigations and discover new protocols, new medicines, new treatments. I'm making tremendous progress in that direction. We work with a lot of implementation partners. These are relatively small contract companies that can work with these investigators who are new to space, don't know how to design for microgravity, don't know how to design for the feasibility and safety to go on station. So with these implementation partners, they bring them together and teach them how to translate their terrestrial experiments to go on station to work and do these investigations as Serena described. Now, Serena talked about the medical types of studies that we do, but there's many others in all the sciences and engineering disciplines. Hewlett-Packard, for example, had just gone through a mission where they had a high-performance computer on station to look at its radiation tolerance, how it survived, and using software in the event there was a radiation hit to be able to recover and restore and continue the calculations that were necessary for its demonstration. But this is something when you think of, when you have to have these long duration missions and you need computational power, you don't want to have glitches interrupting your mission. Another area is even looking at consumer products. Procter & Gamble has done a lot of work in the area of colloids to study the stability of home consumer products, to look at new formulations so they have a longer shelf life and perform better when you're using, as a user, whether it be cleaners, shampoos, hair conditioners. It sounds very pedestrian, but it's a multi-billion type of dollar industry, and it's impacting our environment. So if you can make better products, that's a good thing. And what they're doing on station in these studies, even with supercomputers, they can't model the conditions and the results that they can do on station. Even for tire safety, Goodyear is planning to do a series of experiments to look at different types of silica fillers to go into the tires to reduce the wear on them, to make them longer lasting and more robust in the challenging environment on the road. Fire safety. Of course, fire safety is very important on station, and there's many investigations done for that. But flames burn differently in the microgravity environment, and you can learn a lot about the fire retardant materials that you want to use here on Earth by observing how they burn on station. It's a whole gamut. There's hundreds of experiments going on as we speak, try to better our condition on Earth, for safety, new products, improving the future.
Back in the Apollo era, private industry did not play the same kind of role it's playing now. I mean, it was private industry that built the spacecraft, but they were built to order. NASA said, I want a plane that looks like this, go build what I'm telling you to build. Now it's very different. Private industry is taking the initiative, they're designing their products, and they're coming to sell them to NASA. They're also competing with NASA. So NASA and private outfits are going for some of the same services, some of the same functions. Where do you think this is going to shake down over the course of the next 15 years? Will there be a common symbiotic collaboration between private and public? How much friction will there be at the intersection points? What do you folks think? And Charlie, if you also would respond to this too.
I'll let you guys go.
Okay.
All right, well, first of all, characterizing it as a competition, I think isn't quite accurate. This is something where NASA really embraces their commercial partners. It gives them tremendous relief in some of the aspects of getting to space, and you also can then focus your energies on exploration, or in the case for the National Lab, to look for benefits for life here on Earth. And with the private industries, there's a certain degree of efficiency that comes along with that as well. And there's this new generation that comes out. You just look at what is being done with SpaceX and landing of the booster rockets. I mean, that's Buck Rogers type stuff, and it really excites us. Because right now, if you look at the Falcon Heavy launch, if you launch that and consider everything being expendable, that'd be like $150 million. Being able to do the recovery brings that down to, I think, something like $90 million. So by having these private partners working with great efficiencies and trying to obviously get a good bottom line to the business, it's actually helping all of us to reduce the cost and increase the access to space.
Can't beat what Randy just said. That was perfect. So for us, in my era of training, we grew up training with our commercial partners, whether it was training about our commercial cargo vehicles that are coming to and from station, to certainly the ISS as a national lab. I've never seen it as a competition. I've always seen it as a very symbiotic relationship. It has to be for us to survive. Will we have commercial industry take over station one day and continue this great research that we're doing right now? We're going to have to. We can't let station die in darkness. There's too much we're learning from it. Yeah, we're going to push on towards Lunar Gateway and learn even more from there, but I don't think anyone can exist by themselves as a single entity and make something great happen in space. It has to be together.
Okay, I want to do just 3 quick questions because we want to open the floor up to questions from the audience. Robot probes, uncrewed probes. We invest them with a certain heart and spirit and charm. The little Pathfinder rover that, is about the size of a microwave oven on a skateboard. As soon as it landed on Mars, people began calling it plucky. It always had the adjective plucky ascribed to it. When the Opportunity rover died recently after 15 years on Mars, we wrote encomium to it. We wrote epitaphs for it. I wrote a piece that made me cry. It was like losing a relative. So, can we get as much or almost as much from these wonderful emissaries, non-living emissaries of humanity? And how big a portion of our space portfolio should it be just to turn these things over to machines?
I think, if we talk about Mars, we've had 50 years of research and experimentation on Mars with robotic vehicles, and we're still not exactly ready yet to put humans there, and it's because you don't want to really put a human at risk until you've retired as much of that risk as you can, and the robotic spacecraft have allowed us to find the answers to a lot of things. I think it's going to be robotic spacecraft that are going to enable us to bring these little bugs back that I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Now, the robotic spacecraft today, I know people talk about AI, but a robotic spacecraft today can't do what Serena can do when she looks at something on a petri dish or a test tube in orbit. And until they do, then we need to send humans at some point to make the final determination of the value of what we found. But I think we've got to have robots and humans interacting collaboratively. Scientists tell me that if we had a human on the moon, on Mars for, since 2014, like Curiosity, we would have just about transited the Martian surface by now.
Wow.
But we're not ready to do that yet.
Right.
But when we get there, you're going to find that the amount of knowledge that you grab is going to just be massive.
Yeah, if Serena is on Mars and
I think Columbus probably wishes he had some unmanned probes to send out like every other explorer, because you're right, it paves the way so that it's safer for the human.
Yeah. But once you're there, you can jog 100 yards a lot faster than
Absolutely.
Curiosity can navigate its way there. Did you have any?
So how would you feel about if we lose contact with Voyagers? Like Voyager 1 and 2 right now, more than $20 billion out into interstellar space. Absolutely remarkable.
Yeah.
And I actually brought in my pocket here a CubeSat, just to remind people where, the miniaturization of electronics is enabling missions to be like of this size now, which really reduces the cost, enables the frequency. Since the CubeSat notion about 20 years ago, in 1999, more than 1,000 of these have been launched into space, around the Earth, out into space. 2 of these, a bit larger than this, but still CubeSats, went to Mars, part of Marco, to support the InSight rover.
Right.
They're acting as relays and taking their own set of pictures. So these are low cost and really very capable robotic platforms that extend our reach and understanding as we prepare for human exploration to Mars and beyond, or just in their own right, their own missions.
We talked earlier about inspiration. Imagine you're an elementary school kid.
Oh yeah.
And you're 7, 8, 9 years old, and you have an opportunity to build a satellite like this and have it go to space. What do you think you would feel like?
Yeah.
Well, we've got a class of kids at a school called St. Thomas More Elementary School in Arlington, Virginia, that did exactly that. So we flew a CubeSat that kids at St. Thomas More Elementary School in Arlington had built here on Earth, and I mean they're going berserk.
Yeah. One of the engineers in the Mars program at JPL was once giving an interview to one of our reporters from Time, and he was trying to describe his job. And he said, if you can't have fun coming to work and building robots to send to Mars, give it up. All right, to the lightning round question. Jim Bridenstine, current administrator of NASA, seems like a terrifically competent and gifted guy, says we are going to be back on the moon, boot prints, by 2024. Charlie,
Probably.
is that going to happen? You think?
Can do. I didn't say yes.
Yeah.
I said we can do it. And as I said backstage, show me the money.
Yeah.
That a lot will be determined in the next month,
Right.
when NASA brings its budget forward. That, to be quite candid, this is not new. This was the plan for the Bush administration through Obama, two Bushes,
Yeah.
through Obama, Reagan, and now Trump,
Right.
and we defined it a little bit more. We said the decade of the 20s will be more lunar exploration, to include, we hope, humans back on the surface of the moon, and then on to Mars in the 2030s.
Right.
I think we're on target to do that, but we got to get money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So certainly we already have the proof of principle. We know we can do it 6 times ago, roughly 50 years ago. But the difference here is that we're going to be looking at different things. We're going to be looking at precision landing. We're going to look at solar electric propulsion. We're going to look at the in-situ resource utilization. We're going to look at small nuclear power plants to sort of keep a lunar base station alive in the future. So it's a very different game that's coming up with these future lunar landings. Now, in terms of the price tag, I think nominally people are suggesting $8 billion a year for 5 years might get us there. So for the 2024 landing, $40 billion. I think that
I'm shaking my head now
Yeah.
because I don't know about
it's something
Yeah.
like that, but it's rough order of magnitude.
Yeah.
Wasn't Paul like 100 billion equivalent to today's dollar or something like that?
Yeah, it was 24 billion, but in 1960s dollars. So
So
do the metric conversion. Yeah, it was a lot of money.
Very interesting.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Can we do it? Yes. You know, speaking of from someone who just came through the fiery descent and through the atmosphere on a capsule, you always want to make sure things are done safely. And there's always a certain level of risk to everything we do. We understand that sitting on top of a rocket is not that safe to begin with, but we make it as safe as we possibly can. And so we need to make sure and balance that risk across the board when we're trying to get people back on the moon, and then let folks know, why are we doing this? Well, for many reasons, but certainly it's really the next logical step for us to get to Mars.
Can I go back to your and I know this was not enlightening, the competition
Right.
versus
Yes.
collaboration. All you need to do is look at SpaceX and Blue Origin,
Right.
coming back and doing a vertical landing at the launch site. NASA would have to spend a fortune to do that research if it were not for the fact that we have commercial partners who are doing that
Very good.
and helping us to tackle one of the biggest problems with going to Mars is something we call intradescent landing. How do you get as much stuff on the surface of Mars as we need to get there? And you don't want to put it where it's dependent on a little parachute or a bouncing ball or something.
Right.
We want to be precise in our landings. And so we're learning things from SpaceX, from Blue Origin, from the Chinese on the backside of the moon
Yeah.
recently. I call it compilation or collaboration.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah. Kudos on that. That's a nice sort of hybrid energy. All right, I am going to open the floor to questions. We have time for just a few, but I would love to hear what anyone has to ask. Yes.
Thank you very much. This is very enlightening as well.
Mike, right there.
Thank you very much. This is very entertaining and enlightening. And I was thinking, depending on what poll you believe, 50% of Americans distrust science. Maybe it's more. And science brought us here. Science built this machine. And we have a measles outbreak in New York City because people distrust science. What can we do to have